All right. Hey, everyone. My name is Jeff Ford, and I'm with Man Up and Go, and I am joined today by two very good friends of mine. Well, we'll ask them if they think the very part is true. But Pastor Kevin and Pastor Ron are local pastors here in our area, in the Tampa area. And guys, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Glad to be here.
We're going to talk a little bit about the importance of the church and orphan care and fighting for the fatherless. Maybe just a brief intro and how God has kind of led you to be involved in this fight.
Yeah, I am the lead pastor at Restoration Church here in Trinity, Florida. And so we planted about 5 years ago. We really started to find a heart for serving just right off the bat, but especially in trafficking. That was kind of our first step into this, which really sounds maybe counterintuitive, but we found that trafficking was such an issue in Florida, in Pasco, and in our local community. So we wanted to get involved with that. But what we started to realize was that trafficking in and of itself was more the symptom than the cause. And as we started to look into the causes of trafficking and where people that are victims come from, we found that about 90% of people trafficked come from the foster system. And we figured if we really want to do something about this, we can't just end with the symptom, although we still serve in that way. We need to get to the cause of that. And so we need to support and really reinforce and galvanize that fostering community. So that's where our journey began.
Yep. Awesome. Ron, what about you?
Well, for us, I would say for me, it started personally several years ago, almost a decade now. We got involved in foster care, and as we began that journey, began to see the pain points of the system. Grateful that a system existed here in our area, but just saw some of the challenges that came with that and through our own experience. And so we've adopted two of our children out of the foster care system here in Pinellas and Pasco County, and just after that journey, felt like God was leading me personally, leading our church even as well. It's funny how God brought those two paths at the same time to just lean in, to try to work solutions to the problem as people are pointing fingers at each other. Really just took personal responsibility as a follower of Christ to be salt and light in the world, that we weren't doing our part. Something that's close to the heart of God was, for whatever reason, far from our hearts. And so it's over the last few years, our church has gotten more involved in trying to cast a vision, to help families figure out how they can get involved and what meaningful ways they can support the system to help these kids. And not everybody be a foster parent, but all of us need to do something. And so that's kind of the bell that we want to ring.
So I want to stay on the church a little bit. For those who are watching who don't know, there are at any given time 400,000 to 500,000 kids that are in foster care in the United States. Here in our area in Tampa, where we're filming from right now, we have over 8,000 kids in the Tampa Bay area who are in the system of care. I was thinking about that number last night. It's mind-boggling how many kids are coming into care. Talk to me about, do you think the church is aware of this? Like, you guys are pastors. I want to stay in the church realm. Is the church at large aware of this? And then maybe you'll bring it home to you personally. Is there anything you're doing at your church to kind of make it, I'm just talking about awareness at this point. So we'll start with you, Ron.
Well, I would say no. I think that's why the burden exists for me. I've characterized the church as a sleeping giant, that if we were able to wake up the church and to help them to see that this isn't their problem. I think the sheriff in Pinellas County this week said that we have failed them, referencing our local CBC, but I would take it further and to say, well, for years, maybe even decades, the church has failed these children. And so we have a responsibility just in waking up the church to raise awareness to the needs that exist, and taking away some of the mystery of what does it look like when you say a child is in foster care. What does that mean? Because people make all kinds of assumptions in their mind, and honestly, for the most part, they're making up excuses. And so we have a responsibility as pastors and leaders in this area to keep not only the need in front of people, but to cast a vision for how they can be involved and be a part of the solution. So just, in our context at Calvary, for us 5 years ago, our church turned 150 years old. We didn't want to just use that as that year to celebrate all that God had done over the last 150 years. We wanted to cast a vision for what the future looked like, and while that included several things, one of the key areas and close to my heart was helping to change the trajectory of a child's life through foster care and adoption, and helping families to be a part of that. And so we spent the greater part of the last few years just leaning into the system of care, trying to help our families to see how they can get involved in supporting foster families, becoming foster parents, and helping them along that journey, talking to them about the importance and maybe being open to adoption, not just internationally, but here locally as well. And both are good. Both address the orphan care crisis in the world. But for our purposes and our context, it's, hey, these kids are in our backyard, as you said. You got 8,000 kids in the Tampa Bay area that have been abused, abandoned, or neglected, and they need Christ-centered homes to be a part of. And that means that we've got to also make sure that we're training our families to be Christ-centered, showing them what that looks like as well. So those are some of the few of the ways that tried to ring that bell for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think 8,000 kids, there's no way we understand that. There's no way that we grasp that number. I mean, the other day we had gone to a Rays game, and there weren't 8,000 people in that stadium.
Right.
And I mean, you think about
'Cause it's a Rays game. Yeah.
Because it's a Rays game.
Yeah.
Now, if it would have been like the Lightning or something, that was like a really good one. I think it was a playoff game. And if they would have gotten Tom Brady somehow just to stand in there, it would have brought more people.
Awesome.
But yeah, I mean, like 8,000 is a ton of people. I mean, that's so many children. There's no way we're grasping a hold of that. But I think for us, one of our awareness pieces is what you were mentioning, is we've always had the conception that it's either you're in or you're out, you're the parent or you're not the parent. And there's no room for the village. It's either you're the parents or you're not. Well, we have to realize that we can also have this gray area of the village that supports the people who are in that fight. And I think that's one of the hardest things to cast the vision of, but also one of the most important pieces, is that these people are not islands. They are not doing this on their own. And they need support from the church, meaning the community that surrounds them, as anybody would raising kids, but especially when it's a foster situation. So elevating those positions of how can you actually care for a family that maybe you're not called to be the parent right now, but you're called to be the village around that parent. And how do we elevate those positions and really open awareness to all the nuance of being foster families? We are the family around the family. We are the parents around the parents. We are the village around that child.
And as you know, I'm sorry, the village, once the village gets involved, these families feel supported. And when they feel supported, it helps retain those foster families. So the village it's the missing piece in all of this, and I think maybe the most important.
So I want to kind of stay there, because if you know the Bible, which hopefully you guys are pastors, you do.
Can you spell
Bible. You would think that you know God's heart for the fatherless, and I know you guys do. What are the challenges? And I want to stay here with you. What are the challenges that you see? I mean, James 1:27, we all kind of know that, right? And there's some other verses, Psalm 68, and God's a father to the fatherless and everything that. So the Bible's clear about it. But what are the challenges that you're facing in terms of getting your people engaged in this particular area?
I think we don't see the urgency is one of the biggest things. And I don't think we hear really that it's not an implied message from Jesus. It's a very direct message from Jesus. When we read James, like you referenced there, when James talks about this, saying that true religion is taking care of the orphan and the widow, what he's talking about there is not some abstract idea for him. If this is James, the brother of Jesus, who's writing this book, Jesus himself, we know his father died when he was very young. We just know that. He's not present in most of Jesus' life when Jesus is on the cross. That's why he gives Mary to John, is because his father is not there. And so Jesus in that culture would have been an orphan. When your dad's gone, you now have a widow and you now have an orphan. Jesus isn't metaphorically saying you need to take care of the widow and orphan. He's saying, I've been the orphan and my mom's been the widow. So when you're serving the least of these, you're literally serving me. That's what's happening. And so for us, I don't think we see the immediacy the urgency, and really, again, it's not an implied notion, it's a directive to do this. And I think that's one of the hardest things is we teach it as like a nice add-on to religion or to Christianity. It's like, hey, you're doing all these other things, that's cool. If you want to throw one more thing in, here's like a little bonus situation. Instead of saying, no, this is like the gospel, this is it. And if you want to really serve Jesus, he's literally saying, this is how you directly serve me, is like first and foremost do this, because that's how you serve me, and therefore that's how you serve others.
Yeah.
Ron, I want to ask you this. We Man Up partners with churches to kind of provide these opportunities to serve. And for some churches, it's hard to engage in that level. As we should protect these kids, you don't want just anybody having access, right? And so getting access to the kids and the family sometimes could be a challenge. And so that is a little bit of an obstacle that Man Up is trying to, break down for churches to be able to have. But you've seen a lot of people at your church, at Calvary, serve the orphan. How has that impacted their faith? How have you seen that impact the body of Christ locally?
Yeah. When you bury your head under the sand and you ignore the needs, because once you become aware of the needs, you become accountable, to those needs. So we don't want to go there. But once the need has been exposed and you close the proximity, the distance between the vulnerable child and the follower of Jesus in our churches, you begin to take some of that mystery away, you begin to see the system not as like the totality of the system, but you're looking at an individual child. And when you start looking at individual children and you start leaning in and you begin to help them, I mean, it revolutionizes your own faith and your own journey with the Lord. And so it's like when people go on a mission trip and they say, well, I went to serve them, be a blessing to them, and in return it ended up being a blessing to me. And I think people get, when you attach them to that real need, they begin to understand what it truly looks like to be the salt and the light. And when you are the salt and you are the light, then it changes you in the process. And part of the issue, I think, was how we define church over the last several decades, which was church attendance and then going to a Bible study, and you just checked a couple of boxes and you felt good about yourself. And we separated grace and truth. So we separated out studying the Bible and having good doctrine with like good and right living, and we defined good and right living by these things that we weren't going to do. And then the question that never got answered, well, but what does it look like to be a follower of Christ in action? And so by helping men and women and even children in our churches to see these children that are vulnerable here in our communities, we can serve them. All of a sudden it gives us a true picture of what I believe in the New Testament, what we read about what it looked like to be a follower of Jesus. What does it look like to be a Christian? We began to attach things that define Christianity by these things that are actionable. These are the things that we are now doing, as opposed to what we're boycotting or choosing not to be a part of because we can't identify with them. So what we have seen in our church, complete energizing of faith and personal responsibility. Again, this is not their problem, it's our problem. These kids this is a problem that we need to solve, and we have a responsibility to do so. And as pastors, to cast that vision for our people.
So Kevin, last question for you would be then, as a pastor, right? What would you say, what is your message, given all this being true, what is your message to other pastors? What is your message to those in leadership roles within churches around this issue? It's everybody kind of has issues. Well, I want to help homelessness, and I want to help this, and I want to help that. So we get that. People are passionate about different things, but this one seems to be, I think, fundamental. But maybe it's not. What would you say to other pastors about kind of solving this issue of fatherlessness and the brokenness that we find in families?
Yeah, I think one of the first steps is if I were to say what you could do to really make this work, step one is personalize it. If you have a face to the problem, it changes everything. If you're not involved with this right now, go to a place that is. Get involved with Man Up or somewhere, and literally go to the spot, see the things going on. That right there wrecks you. That starts the whole conversation. Get your people to do that. Take your board, take your staff, take whoever. see the problem. If you don't see it, you're not going to believe it. But once you sit down and you actually notice it, stare it in the face, then you have no choice. Again, the awareness creates accountability, and you have no choice but to say, now we have to do something. Then from there, then you'd start to devise these plans. Again, make inroads for everybody to be a part of it. The whole church should have a place to serve in that. Whether they can take in a child themselves or not, they should have a role that they can take in. Now, it could be making dinner once a month. It could be I'll do their lawn care. Anything. Just whatever it is that you can do to support that. Create as many other roles in that community as you can to support the ones that are doing the hardest work within it. Make sure that child's cared for. And really, one of the biggest things, and I know this might be a tangent, but in your kids' ministry, in your church, make this a ministry. This is your ministry. It's not just for the church folks and the whatever. This might be a kid that you only have for 6 weeks, but your job is to pour into that child. You have them for 6 weeks. Make sure your kids' workers know, make sure that your volunteers are aware that this is a ministry within a ministry. And if we don't see it that way, we're going to just skate right by it. But we have a chance to make an impact. We got to take it and make the most of it.
Amen. So Man Up, we really exist as an entity to equip the church. We are a parachurch ministry. We're not the church. We are made up of church, members of the body of Christ, but we really want to see the church be the hero in all of this, because we believe that the church is the hope of the world. We really do. And so that's our goal is to help the church in this capacity, connect them to opportunities to serve, open their eyes, bring awareness, and all of those things. And so we appreciate the partnership and working with you all and getting your men and women engaged and children engaged in this fight for the fatherless. And listen, there's no shortage of need out there. And I've used that term as well, a sleeping giant. The church is a sleeping giant. And if we would wake up to this reality, think about what we could do, and the gospel changes lives. We know this. And so if we can get into an environment where we can now impact these kids' lives, impact the parents' lives, guess what? Those people now become part of your local congregation, right? Mm-hmm. Like they come in, you've wrapped around them before they even knew Christ, and now they're coming in and saying, I want what you have. Mm-hmm. Because this tangible expression of love is persuading to me. Mm-hmm. Whatever you're doing, whatever this faith thing is, tell me more about it. So, and we want to help equip the church where we can to do that. So, Pastor Ron, Pastor Kevin, thank you guys so much for joining me. I really appreciate you coming out on, quite frankly, a very chilly Florida morning of about 68 degrees. And
warm up after the flannels.
Yeah.
Where's the fire?
Where's the fire? So thank you guys for this, and we'll keep fighting for the fatherless.
Absolutely. Absolutely.